Everyone got invited to my cousin's wedding, except me. My aunt said, "Don't make it about yourself," and I just nodded. Weeks later, I held my own Seaside ceremony, and it went viral. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when your world suddenly shatters, not just metaphorically, but literally? That's what happened to me one morning, a few months ago, when my coffee mug slipped from my fingers, exploding on the kitchen tile. But honestly, I barely even noticed. My eyes were glued to my phone, scrolling through picture after picture of smiling faces, all gathered in my aunt's sunlit backyard. 34 guests. I counted them meticulously, as if the number might magically change if I just tried again. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. My mom's old college roommate. Even Great Aunt Judith, who needs a walker to get around. Every single person was there. Except me. These were photos from Fiona's bridal shower. Tables draped in cream linens, those gorgeous floral centerpieces in coral and mint. Fiona's favorite, of course. Champagne flutes raised in endless toasts. It was clearly a meticulously planned celebration, weeks, maybe months in the making. And I never even knew it existed until that exact moment. The sting was sharper than any ceramic shard, because just last month, I'd sent Fiona a handwritten card, pressed flowers from my own balcony garden tucked inside. I'd even offered to design her entire wedding suite, invitations, programs, everything, free of charge. A gift from one cousin to another. My cozy Portland condo, usually so warm and bright, suddenly felt ice cold, the spring sunshine streaming through the windows now harsh and exposing. In that moment, I realized something truly awful. I wasn't just forgotten. I was deliberately, painstakingly erased. I sank onto a kitchen stool, memories washing over me like a relentless tide. Last Thanksgiving flashed before my eyes. I could still hear Aunt Marlene's voice, ringing across the dining room, practically serenading Fiona's recent promotion to vice president at the bank. 29, darling. Always knew she'd make something of herself. Then her gaze had drifted to me, her smile thinning, almost a sneer. Ocean's still doing that little hobby of hers, the logos and whatnot. That little hobby. That little hobby that paid for this condo. That little hobby that built a client list including 3 national brands. My parents, bless their hearts, just sat there, silently nodding along, letting everyone position Fiona as the golden child, right in front of my face. Even when I mentioned the down payment on my condo, $150,000 I'd saved over 7 years, the conversation had pivoted so fast back to Fiona's engagement ring, it gave me whiplash. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone again. I pulled up my mother's contact and hit call before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the 4th ring. "Ocean? Is everything all right?" Her voice had that familiar blend of concern and judgment, as if she'd already decided whatever I was calling about was an overreaction. "There was a bridal shower for Fiona yesterday," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Everyone was there. Why wasn't I invited?" A weighted pause stretched between us, then a sigh. "Oh, that. Well, Marlene thinks you always make everything about yourself. Fiona deserves her special day." The accusation landed like a physical slap. Make everything about myself? When have I ever? Please don't start, Ocean. This is exactly what we wanted to avoid. Your cousin deserves to be celebrated without drama. I stood up straighter, suddenly aware that my shoulders had been hunched, my body instinctively trying to make itself smaller. "So I'm drama now? That's what you all think of me." "It's not personal, Ocean. Not personal." The same dismissive words she used whenever she wanted to wave away my feelings. My free hand stopped trembling. A strange calm settled over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. Planned. Discussed. "I'm going to call Aunt Marlene." "Ocean, don't." My mother's voice rose with alarm, but I'd already ended the call. I found Aunt Marlene's number, dialing, surprised by my own steadiness. When her clipped, impatient voice came through, I didn't bother with pleasantries. Why wasn't I invited to Fiona's bridal shower? Another pause. Then, chillingly, I was wondering when you'd call. No apology. No excuse. Just cold acknowledgement. You shouldn't be there. Fiona deserves a day that's just hers. Just hers. as if my presence would somehow diminish her happiness, as if I were a shadow that might darken her spotlight. I'm her cousin. Her only cousin. The words felt hollow even as I said them. Blood relation clearly meant nothing. Listen, Ocean. Aunt Marlene's voice hardened. We've all discussed this. The wedding plans, too. I suggest you don't make this into something bigger than it needs to be. Some relationships in this family are already strained. The threat wasn't subtle. Push back, and whatever fragile connection I had with my family might vanish entirely. I stood at my kitchen window, staring at the city spread out below, and suddenly understood with perfect clarity. My family valued appearances over genuine connection. They always had. I hung up without saying goodbye, the silence in my apartment no longer oppressive, but clarifying. A cardinal landed on my balcony railing, its bright red feathers vivid against the gray spring sky. It watched me for a moment before flying away, and I found myself wondering what it might be like to be that free. Later that day, my phone pinged with a notification while I was sketching logo concepts for a new client. Deadlines wait for no one, but habit made me glance at the screen. A group message from Aunt Marlene. Remember to bring Fiona's wedding flowers on Saturday. Good thing we didn't invite Ocean. Less drama. My pencil stopped mid-stroke. The room tilted slightly as I leaned against the kitchen counter, my breathing shallow, the phone screen blurring before my eyes. I blinked hard, reading it again. This wasn't an oversight, not a simple mistake. This was a coordinated family exclusion. I took a screenshot before the message disappeared with a soft whoosh. Deleted, but not before I had the evidence. The notification showed Fiona, Aunt Marlene, and my mother. All in the chat. My mother. Of course. The next morning, I drove to my parents' suburban home, that screenshot burning a hole in my pocket like a loaded gun. Mom answered the door in her gardening clothes, dirt smudged across one cheek. Ocean? What a surprise. I was just about to make some tea. I followed her into the living room where she sat in her favorite armchair, settling into it with the comfortable ease of someone secure in their position. I remained standing, acutely aware of the family photos arranged on the mantel. Fiona, centered in most of them. My face, half hidden in shadows or caught mid-blink. I got an interesting message yesterday, I said, pulling out my phone. Accidentally sent to me. But her face changed when I showed her the screenshot. Not surprise, but resignation. She didn't even try to deny it. We all agreed it would be easier this way. She smoothed invisible wrinkles from her pants. Fiona deserves a beautiful wedding without complications. Complications? The word tasted bitter. You mean me? Now, Ocean, don't be dramatic. She sighed, using that familiar tone reserved for when I was being difficult. Perhaps you should make other plans for that. Weekend in May. Other plans? I repeated, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. While my cousin gets married at the Grand Lake Hotel. That $95,000 wedding, where every distant relative I barely know is invited except me. Mom's eyebrows lifted slightly. How did you know about the venue? Cousin Rachel called last week, asking about carpooling to the wedding. She assumed I'd be there. A small, cruel satisfaction bloomed when I saw her flinch. The silence stretched between us like a chasm growing wider by the second. Your father, and I think it's better this way, she finally said. The whole family agrees. The whole family has been told what about me exactly? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked away, fiddling with a loose thread on her sleeve. Just that you've always been sensitive about Fiona getting attention. The betrayal landed like a physical blow. Years of holidays where I sat quietly while Fiona was showered with praise. Years of watching my accomplishments dismissed while hers were celebrated with champagne toasts. You're trying to erase me from the family narrative, I said, the realization crystallizing. Everyone already believes I'm difficult because that's what you've told them. That's not true, she protested, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. It is true. And now I have a choice, accept being excluded or risk losing what little connection we still have. Mom stood, crossing to the window. I hope you'll make the right decision. Your father and I have been helping with your property taxes. If you make trouble about this wedding, if I make trouble. The words escaped in a harsh laugh. Like standing up for myself? Like refusing to be erased? If. This is exactly why Marlene thought it best not to include you. Her voice hardened. Everything becomes a drama with you, Ocean. I left without saying goodbye, driving aimlessly for hours. 3 client deadlines passed while I sat paralyzed in my apartment, unable to focus on the simplest design tasks. 3 days of potential revenue vanished while I stared at my phone, waiting for someone, anyone in my family, to say this was all a terrible mistake. No one did. That evening, Isla brought Thai food and wine to my condo, listening patiently as I recounted every agonizing detail. Unlike my family, she didn't interrupt or dismiss my feelings. That's textbook emotional manipulation, she said, refilling my glass. They're gaslighting you into believing you're the problem when they're the ones excluding you. Her validation felt like the first sip of water after days in a desert. Marlene and your mom are tag-teaming to control the narrative. Classic toxic family dynamics. Later, alone on my balcony, I watched the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. The cardinal returned, perching briefly on the railing before flying away. As I sat there, sipping wine gone warm, I wondered, should I attend the wedding anyway and force a confrontation? Or step away completely and build my own celebration elsewhere? The family I'd known all my life was slipping away. But was it worth fighting for relationships that caused so much pain? Fiona's engagement photos appeared on my Instagram feed at precisely 8:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was midway through my first cup of coffee when her radiant smile filled my screen, her fiancé gazing at her with practiced adoration against a backdrop of autumn leaves. The caption beneath cut sharper than any knife could, celebrating our journey with those who truly support us, keeping our wedding intimate with only the people who've always been there. My phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession, private messages from cousins I'd exchanged perhaps 10 words with at family gatherings over the years. Why are you causing drama during Fiona's special time? Families should support each other no matter what. Aunt Marlene is so upset about your behavior. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter, my hand trembling slightly. The accusations made no sense until I realized what was happening. They were rewriting history, crafting a narrative where I declined an invitation, rather than acknowledging I was deliberately excluded. My grandmother's call came that evening as I was washing dishes, her voice wavering with disappointment. "Ocean, honey, I never thought you'd refuse to support your cousin's special day." The plate in my hands nearly slipped. "Grandma, I wasn't invited." "That's not what Marlene told me." Her voice hardened with certainty. "She said you couldn't put aside your jealousy for even one day." After we hung up, I stood motionless at my kitchen sink, water running over my hands until it turned from warm to cold. The family story about me was taking shape without my input. According to Isla, who still spoke with my mother weekly, Aunt Marlene had been sharing tearful accounts of my jealousy issues with anyone who would listen. The following week, Barton Media canceled our contract for their spring campaign. The email was polite but clear. "We've heard you can be difficult to work with. We need someone who fits our collaborative culture." 3 days later, Westerly Home Goods pulled out of our preliminary discussions. The loss of both projects carved $27,000 from my expected quarterly income. I tracked the connections methodically. Barton's marketing director played tennis with my uncle. Westerly's owner attended the same church as Aunt Marlene. Sleep became a distant memory. I spent nights hunched over my computer, redesigning my portfolio website instead of resting. Every pixel adjustment, every color shift felt like reclaiming a small piece of my narrative. At 3 a.m., with my eyes burning from screen glare, I wondered how many hours of work it would take to outrun the whispers. My once comfortable routine fractured. I stopped visiting Marigold Coffee, despite their perfect oat milk lattes, because Aunt Marlene's Bridge Club met their Thursday mornings. I drove 15 minutes out of my way to shop at a different grocery store after spotting my mother's friend, Caroline, examining apples in my usual produce section. Checking social media became a form of self-harm. Each notification triggered a physical response, quickened pulse, shallow breathing, fingers turning cold. I started documenting every interaction with family in a leather-bound journal, recording dates, exact wording, witnesses present. The evidence felt important somehow, though I wasn't sure who I was collecting it for. The anonymous text arrived on a Sunday morning. Some people aren't stable enough to attend formal events. Your absence is a kindness to everyone. I recognized the phrasing, Aunt Marlene's particular brand of cruelty wrapped in concern. The phone slipped from my fingers onto the couch as something inside me finally broke. The doorbell rang at that exact moment. I considered ignoring it until I heard Isla's voice through the door. "I know you're in there, Ocean. I brought Thai food and wedding magazines." She stood on my threshold, clutching a paper bag from Bangkok Kitchen and a stack of glossy publications. Her camera bag was slung over one shoulder. "What are you doing here?" My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Isla pushed past me into the apartment. "Let's plan something that's actually worth celebrating. A day that's about joy, not appearances." I was about to ask what she meant when my mother's silver sedan pulled into the visitor parking space, visible from my living room window. My stomach clenched. "Client call in 5 minutes." I lied, reaching for my laptop as my mother knocked at the door. Isla squeezed my shoulder before retreating to the kitchen with our food. My mother entered without waiting for an invitation, her eyes taking inventory of my living space, as if searching for evidence of my supposed instability. "We need to talk, Ocean." She sat primly on my couch, her handbag balanced on her knees. "This has gone far enough. The invitations are already printed. We're also down this." "What invitations?" I remained standing, suddenly aware of the power dynamics at play. "Fiona's wedding invitations." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. "You need to let this go. This isn't about an invitation." The clarity in my voice surprised even me. It's about years of being treated as less than. Not a daughter. Ever. My mother's face hardened. "If you can't support Fiona's happiness, maybe you're not the daughter I thought you were." The words should have hurt, but instead, they illuminated something I'd never seen clearly before. I straightened my shoulders, reclaiming the full height I'd spent years unconsciously diminishing around my family. "I'm exactly the daughter you raised," I told her, my voice steady. "I just stopped accepting the role you assigned me." Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps even respect, before she composed herself. But in that moment, I realized a fundamental truth that changed everything. My worth wasn't determined by family validation. It never was. Later that evening, Isla and I sat on my balcony, half-eaten Thai food between us. She scrolled through her calendar on her phone. "I have a client photo shoot in Santa Barbara in 3 weeks. Come with me. We'll make it a working vacation." I could use an assistant. The offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes. While my family crafted excuses for my exclusion, my friends were creating alternatives for my inclusion. My phone chimed with a text from Thomas. "Just declined my invite to Fiona's wedding. Not going somewhere my friend isn't welcome." The next morning, I woke up and spoke confidently about my design business during a networking breakfast for the first time in months. 3 potential clients requested follow-up meetings. Something had shifted inside me, a quiet certainty replacing the desperate need for approval. When Isla and I arrived in Santa Barbara 3 weeks later, the Pacific Ocean stretched before us like possibility itself. At a small bookshop near the marina, I met Mateo, the owner with kind eyes and a quiet laugh who asked thoughtful questions about my design work. "You should see my place at sunset," he said after our 3rd coffee together. "I restored an old seaside villa just north of here. The light is perfect for someone with your eye for design." Standing on his terrace that evening, watching the sun sink into the ocean, a thought formed with unexpected clarity. What if the answer wasn't fighting for inclusion in a celebration that didn't want me? What if I wrote a different story for myself entirely? 2 months later, my phone sat on Mateo's kitchen counter, its screen displaying a half-finished invitation design. The coastal villa's morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating the space where 18 place settings would soon host the only people who truly mattered in my life. "What do you think about this font pairing?" I pointed to the screen, where elegant script contrasted with clean sans serif text. "Too predictable?" Mateo leaned forward, the scent of his coffee mingling with the salt air drifting through open windows. "It feels like you." Confident, but not shouting for attention. I smiled, making a small adjustment to the spacing. For 3 weeks, Every spare moment had gone into planning this gathering. Not a reaction to family drama, but a celebration reflecting who I'd become. Each element, from hand-pressed botanical prints to custom playlists, showcased my professional talents while honoring genuine connections. May 15th, I said, tracing the date on screen. Far enough from Fiona's wedding that no one can claim I'm being competitive. Does it matter what they think? Matteo asked, his voice gentle but challenging. It matters that I know my intentions. I saved the file and closed my laptop. This isn't about them anymore. For the first time since finding those bridal shower photos, excitement bubbled up without the bitter aftertaste of rejection. I was creating rather than reacting, building something authentic rather than fighting for space where I was unwanted. My phone rang, Aunt Marlene's name flashing on screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then decided against it. I was done hiding. Hello. My voice came out steady. Professional. Ocean. Her voice could freeze water. What's this I hear about you planning some vacation during family wedding season? You need to take down those social media posts immediately. I frowned, confusion momentarily replacing caution. What posts? Isla's photography page. The save the date announcement for your event. At a seaside villa? On May 15th. My stomach dropped. May 15th? But Fiona's wedding wasn't until June. Silence stretched between us. When Marlene spoke again, her voice dripped with artificial sweetness. Oh, didn't you know? The date was moved weeks ago. May 15th at the Grand Monarch Hotel. Everyone's been informed. Everyone except me. So you're having your little party the same day as Fiona's wedding? The accusation hung in the air. Family will take sides, Ocean. Think about what you're doing. My first instinct was panic. Should I change my date? Apologize for a conflict I didn't create? But as Marlene continued listing reasons I should rearrange my plans, something hard and resolute solidified inside me. I looked at the invitation design, at Matteo setting coffee mugs in the sink, at the home that had welcomed me without conditions. I won't rearrange my joy to accommodate your judgment, I said quietly. What did you just say to me? The date stays, Aunt Marlene. Anyone who wants to attend either event should follow their heart. You've made yours clear. I ended the call before she could respond. Matteo watched me carefully, waiting. Apparently Fiona's wedding is the same day as our celebration, I told him. Complete coincidence. I looked at him, really looked at him. Do you want to change our date? The question hung between us. With both ceremonies now scheduled for the same day, I faced a choice. Postpone my celebration to avoid conflict, or proceed with the day Matteo and I had planned. Was preserving peace with people who excluded me worth disrupting my own happiness? No, I answered, finally. We're keeping our date. Matteo nodded, understanding without needing explanation. This is the difference between chosen family and blood ties, I realized. One requires performance, the other offers acceptance. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with Isla's message. Saw your final invitation design. Gorgeous. Consider photography services my gift to you both. I smiled, typing back my thanks. Within minutes, a group chat formed with friends, coordinating travel plans, turning our gathering into a weekend celebration. Thomas offered to handle wine selection, while Gianna wanted to arrange flowers from local markets. You focus on the creative stuff, Matteo said that evening, showing me spreadsheets, tracking accommodations, and transportation. I've got logistics covered. As we worked side by side, him managing practical details, me designing personal touches, I realized we were creating something neither of my parents would understand. This wasn't about reaction, but intention. Not about competition, but completion. My phone began buzzing constantly with family messages, but friends created a protective buffer. When Aunt Marlene sent a paragraph about selfish choices, Isla responded with oceanfront venue photos. When my mother texted asking how I could do this, Matteo handed me paint swatches for table settings. A week before our celebration, an unexpected text arrived from my cousin Rachel, whom I hadn't spoken to in months. Grandmother's asking questions about why you weren't invited to anything. Marlene's story isn't holding up anymore. I read it twice, unsure how to respond. The next day, another message arrived, this time from Uncle David. Something doesn't add up about this wedding drama. Fiona keeps changing her explanation. The family narrative, so carefully constructed, began showing cracks. Different relatives had been told different versions of my exclusion, and the contradictions were becoming noticeable. When my grandmother's name appeared on my phone that evening, I answered immediately. Ocean? Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. I'd like to hear your side of this wedding business. Before I could form a response, another call beeped through, my mother. I let it go to voicemail, focusing on my grandmother's questions. Later, I listened to my mother's message, her voice strained with forced casualness. We need to talk about a compromise. Can we meet tomorrow? It's urgent. I set the phone down, looking out at the sunset painting Mateo's garden in golden light. For the first time, the thought of facing my family didn't fill me with dread. Whatever came next, I was standing on solid ground. The knock on my door came at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before my ceremony. Through the peephole, I saw my mother clutching her purse with white knuckles, while Aunt Marlene stood beside her, a designer handbag dangling from a tight grip. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but the truth needed addressing eventually. Ocean, sweetheart. My mother's voice carried forced cheer as she stepped into my condo. We thought we should talk. Aunt Marlene followed, her gaze sweeping critically across my living room where design samples for my ceremony with Mateo lay neatly arranged. This has gone far enough, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. I remained standing while they settled onto my sofa. The power dynamic felt different now. In their presence, I no longer shrank. We'd like to propose a compromise, my mother said, her hands fidgeting with her wedding ring. You can attend Fiona's reception. The evening portion only. Her eyes met Marlene's briefly. If you cancel your party, think about how this looks to everyone, Aunt Marlene added. 2 events on the same day divides the family, forces people to choose sides. My mother leaned forward, her voice dropping. Your grandmother is very stressed about this situation. At her age, this kind of family conflict isn't good for her heart. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Instead, I walked to my drafting table and returned with a leather portfolio. I'd like to show you something, I said, opening it to reveal watercolor sketches of an intimate seaside ceremony. This is what Mateo and I have planned. 18 guests. No formal invitations. Just people who genuinely care about us. I turned pages slowly, showcasing menus I'd hand-lettered, custom place settings, flower arrangements in shades of amber and sage. The date was set weeks before I learned about Fiona's wedding, I explained, my voice steady. We didn't choose it to compete. We chose it because the villa has perfect sunset lighting for photography. My mother's brow furrowed in confusion. But why didn't you tell us? I pulled out another folder containing mock-ups of elegantly designed invitations I never sent. I respected your decision to exclude me. I didn't think you'd want to know. She looked genuinely stunned. Ocean. We never meant. I'm not asking anyone to choose, I interrupted gently. You made your choice months ago. This celebration isn't about Fiona. I closed the portfolio. It isn't even about you. Aunt Marlene stood abruptly, pacing toward my workstation where client projects hung alongside ceremony plans. This doesn't change anything, she insisted. Playing dress-up won't change that Fiona's wedding is the real event. I felt something snap inside me, not in anger, but in crystal clarity. I'm not playing anything, Aunt Marlene. I'm living authentically while you're performing. I gestured toward my portfolio. These designs aren't pretend. They're my profession. The profession you've dismissed as that little hobby for years. I slid a brochure across the coffee table. This is my wedding portfolio. 3 national brands have hired me based on these designs. While you were telling everyone about my jealousy issues, I was building a business that pays for this condo. My mother sank deeper into the sofa, her eyes lingering on a photo of Mateo and me at his villa. For the first time, she seemed to see beyond her sister's narrative. Were we really that cruel? She asked quietly. Aunt Marlene snorted, grabbing her purse. This is ridiculous. I'm not sitting here while she twists everything around. She stormed toward the door but paused with her hand on the knob. Fiona's wedding costs $95,000. It's at the Grand Hotel. There will be 200 guests. That's what a real celebration looks like. I smiled, not unkindly. That sounds lovely for Fiona. I hope she feels truly seen there. After Marlene slammed the door, my mother remained seated, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. You taught me I wasn't worth including, I told her, my voice soft but firm. I taught myself I was worth celebrating. She opened her mouth to respond, but her phone chimed with a text. She read it, her face paling slightly. What is it? I asked. Your cousin Deborah is asking if she can come to your ceremony instead of Fiona's. She looked up, bewildered. How does she even know about it? I shrugged. People talk. The same way they talked about excluding me. After my mother left, promising to think about everything, I watered my balcony garden, wondering which ceremony she'd attend. If either. My phone rang just as the sun slipped behind downtown buildings. Ocean? Mateo's voice sounded excited. You won't believe this. That wedding vlog I told you about, Modern Celebrations? They want to feature our ceremony. They love the idea of an intimate, designer's wedding that focuses on authenticity over extravagance. I leaned against the railing, watching a cardinal land nearby, the same vibrant red as the one I'd seen the day I discovered the bridal shower photos. The story was shifting in ways I never anticipated. Wow, I whispered, more to myself than to Mateo. For the first time since this all began, I felt neither sad nor angry, just free. 7 weeks after our ceremony, I nearly dropped my phone when Mateo showed me the statistics. 80,000 likes on our wedding photo. The number seemed impossible, yet there it was on the screen, along with hundreds of comments praising our authentic celebration of love. Look at this one, Mateo said, pointing to a comment from a popular design blogger. Ocean's attention to meaningful details rather than empty extravagance redefines what a modern ceremony can be. I laughed softly, remembering all the family gatherings where I sat silently while relatives fawned over Fiona's conventional choices. Now strangers were celebrating my vision while my family's grand hotel wedding had faded into the background of social media memory. My design business calendar now bulged with appointments. 3 major brands had reached out since the wedding feature went viral, tripling my client base overnight. Yesterday, an editor from California Wedding Quarterly emailed about featuring our ceremony, specifically requesting an interview about my design work. The irony? I told Mateo as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset paint Portland's skyline. They excluded me to keep me from stealing focus. And now? The doorbell interrupted my thought. A courier delivered a cream-colored envelope with Aunt Marlene's distinctive handwriting. Inside, a terse letter demanded I decline the magazine feature out of respect for Fiona's privacy during this difficult time. My hands should have been shaking. 7 weeks ago, they would have been. Instead, a calm clarity washed over me as I tucked the letter back into its envelope. What will you do? Mateo asked, his voice gentle. I walked to my desk and pulled out a copy of the magazine that featured my design portfolio last month. I slipped it into a mailing envelope with a note I'd composed without hesitation. I'm not competing with Fiona. I'm completing my own story. No anxiety flooded my system as I sealed the envelope. No desperate need for approval tightened my chest. The transformation still surprised me, how completely I'd stopped seeking validation from people determined to withhold it. 2 days later, Isla called with news that sent me spinning through our apartment. The showcase is confirmed, she announced. 30 designers, and you're the headliner. My friends had organized a reimagined design showcase at a restored estate near Seattle, featuring artists who'd thrown out traditional approaches. The event emphasized authentic connection over manufactured perfection, substance over performance. At the opening reception, Isla raised her glass to writing ourselves into stories worthy of our lives. She toasted, and the room erupted in applause. I stood among people who celebrated rather than diminished my vision, and the contrast to family gatherings couldn't have been starker. The following month, Mateo and I moved into a modest apartment overlooking downtown. The space was smaller than my condo, but filled with light and possibilities. My calendar now included speaking engagements about authentic design alongside client meetings with companies that valued substance over flash. I was arranging prints for my office wall when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Aunt Marlene stood there with Fiona slightly behind her, looking entrapped. "We need to talk," Marlene said, pushing past me into the apartment. "This has gone far enough." Fiona looked uncomfortable as Marlene continued. "Was all this necessary? The magazine? The showcase? Were you so determined to make a point?" I studied their faces. Marlene's was pinched, Fiona's a mask of discomfort. And I felt a surprising wave of compassion. "You think this is about you?" I asked quietly. "It's the first time I've celebrated without worrying how you'd twist it. That's all." They left shortly after, Marlene stiff-backed and silent, Fiona with a backward glance I couldn't quite interpret. As I watched them walk away from the showcase, I wondered if healing family wounds requires both sides to acknowledge the injury, or if sometimes the healthiest path is to simply tend your own garden and let others make their choices. What would you do? Work to repair relationships that cause such pain, or focus on nurturing the connections that helped you bloom?